Okay, here we're going to talk about might as wells. Another update on the fender replacement project. I have shown you all the brackets that I have derusted and repainted, and up here is some of the canister and gas recirculation hardware that all those brackets that these are used to mount on those brackets, I should say. And so I'm not going to reattach them until I've got the fender sorted, so that's coming in a while. But I wanted to show you a might as well. And this might as well has to do with the steering column, the intermediate shaft in particular. What you can see here is the bushing for the intermediate steering shaft, and as you can see, and I will zoom in. Come on, focus, focus. God, I hate this camera. As you can see, one side of this bushing, this, I don't know, cowling, I don't know what you call it, is rusted through and basically shot. So this, I guess it's a bearing. This bearing cannot be replaced alone. Unfortunately, you have to replace the entire intermediate steering shaft to get that bushing replaced. And because steering is obviously probably one of the most important safety considerations of driving a car, I'm not going to cut corners here. I feel kind of forced to replace the intermediary shaft because that bearing is pretty heavily rusted, and I don't know if that shows up at all, but it's rusted on both sides, and so although well, there is some play in that bearing, but I'm not taking any chances. So I will be replacing the intermediate steering shaft so I can get a new one of those bearings put on. In the meantime, there's a clamp, not a clamp, there's a bracket that bolts onto the frame here. There's also a bolt up back here that so there's one that goes in horizontal, there's one that goes in vertical, and there are a couple of screws on the bearing itself that hold it in place. That bearing is currently soaking in my electrolysis bath, derusting. And that is an important mounting bracket to preserve, because from what I understand, it's very difficult to find replacements. Good luck at Pull Apart or your local salvage guy. So fortunately, that bracket is salvageable. It's not severely so severely rusted that I can't reuse it once the electrolysis derusting is over with. So just like with the other brackets, when it's fully derusted, I will prime it and then finish coat it with the VHT chassis paint. And like I said, that's a might as well. Another might as well, I found that my replacement brake lines, these are stainless steel brake lines that I replaced. I do have video of that actually that I've never published, of replacing all of these brake lines. It's quite the challenge. Anyway, I had these here all crisscrossed. So since I had such easy and open access to the brake lines here, I disconnected the line down here and I untangled them and separated them the way they were intended to be separated. You can see the little bracket here that I was able to put back on now that the lines aren't all tangled up. And yes, that does mean that I cannot forget to bleed the brakes. The driver's side brake has to be bled since I've had this off. And so, you know, it is what it is. At least this way it's properly installed. The chances of chafing are minimized. And so, again, those brake lines should last for the life of the car, which hopefully is going to be a good long time. And lastly, over here we have more anti-rust treatment. I put some POR 15 and I used the Eastwood top coat on top of it. It's got the first coat of top coat on it. I will put at least 2 more coats. No, not at least. I will put 2 more coats and that'll be it. But obviously these are areas, well, maybe not obviously, but these areas were rusted to some extent. Down here, interestingly, it was the spot welds. Wherever there was a spot weld, there was some rust. So I have treated where I saw rust, and also there was some rust under the booster, and for yucks and giggles, I treated that as well. You might be able to see it up here as well on the bottom of the booster underneath the master cylinder. I have a replacement master cylinder that I thought that I was going to need. It turned out I didn't, but I decided to keep it rather than return it. So that's a 21-year-old master cylinder, and I might just at some point in the future do another might as well and replace that since I have a new one. So anyway, so that's it for my little might as well interlude, and I'll show you what the shaft looks like. The new shaft, I should say, looks like once I replace it, because certainly while I've got easy access to the shaft without the fender on, I'm going to do that. So I think this is the more expensive version of the shaft. The earlier TJ versions, I think it goes for like 180, 190 bucks. But the 2001 TJs, I think the intermediate shaft costs over 200. But it is what it is. I'm not going to take any chances with such an important device. So we're going to go buy a new one. And that's it. So more updates to come, I'm sure. See you later. Bye. Hell, just a quick footnote type of snippet. This is the last of the brackets that I need to recondition before I can put my new driver's side fender on. This bracket is the bracket that holds on the intermediate steering shaft, and it is now, as I think you can see, completely derusted. And I did use the electrolysis bath to get the heavy rust off. You can see that the bracket is now quite thoroughly pitted in areas. And I'm not going to do anything about the pitting. I'm just going to do, just like with the other brackets, excuse me, 2 coats of Rust-Oleum primer, followed by 5 to 6 coats of VHT roll bar and chassis paint, and then we'll let it cure for several days, and then we will mount this along with our new steering intermediate steering shaft, and we're off to the races in terms of putting the rest of the car back together. So I just wanted to show you what the part looked like before I painted it, and away we go. So onward to the next snippet. Bye. Okay, I'm going to be replacing the intermediate steering shaft, and there is one step that you have to do before you take that sucker off, and that is that you need to secure the steering wheel. Now, there's something inside the steering wheel called a clock spring. For those of you who are not familiar with the clock spring, well, I'm not super familiar with it either, but what I do know is that if the steering shaft is off and you turn the steering wheel too far one way or the other, you're going to damage the clock spring inside the steering wheel and cause yourself additional problems. And that may include the airbag, which is not super cheap to replace, although I don't know about those, lifetime warranties for airbags and whatnot. Probably wouldn't be covered. But be that as it may, I have used a strap to secure the steering wheel so it can't move. So I am now free to remove the intermediate steering shaft. I'm going to take the reservoir off, the coolant reservoir, for ease of access. I might not need to take it off, we'll see. And then get this shaft off. And then below here is the mounting bracket, or the bracket mount, I should say, the steering shaft bracket mount. I'm going to slap a coat of paint on that and then put the new shaft in. And onward to the next project. So we'll see how well this goes. More in a minute. Okay, the intermediate shaft is off. It wasn't that difficult to get off. And so I have since gone in and sanded down the shaft mounting bracket mount and cleaned it off with some Eastwood paint prep. And so now I'm going to put some Eastwood Platinum rust encapsulator on this little bracket, and then paint over that with top coat, so that hopefully I will not have to deal with a similar issue for years to come. And it's one of those might as wells, right? I've probably said this before. With the Fender off, almost unfettered access, might as well. So that's where I'm at. So I'll put the Platinum rust encapsulator on, and then I will put either the POR top coat or the chassis black, whichever the spirit moves me. It will be brushed on, it won't be sprayed. I will also say that in terms of the shaft, that bearing initially seemed loose to me, but comparing it to the new shaft, it's not all that much different. But the fact that the flange was partially rusted away, and again, I have unusual access because the fender is off, I figure might as well. So these joints are not in that terrible a shape. They're not too loosey-goosey. I probably could have lived with this thing and just put up with the partially rusted flange there, but might as well, you know? So that's where I'm at, and I'll show you the progress as I make it. Until next time. Okay, here's another quickie update. I have removed the steering shaft, and come on, focus. God, I hate this camera. I've removed the old steering shaft, and I have treated the steering shaft mounting bracket with the Eastwood Platinum and top coated it with the Eastwood chassis black paint. So the bracket is ready to go back on. I have also taken the liberty to remove a little bit of rust on the nose of the car, the back of the front grille where some of the components of the fender bolt onto. So I consider this temporary until I'm ready to have the car repainted. But since there was rust where you now see primer, I took a wire wheel to it and then treated the areas with a rust remover product called Naval Jelly, and then primed those areas. So the Jeep is ready to start going back together as soon as the paint is done curing for all of the brackets. I have repainted the mounting bracket, which I'll show you in a minute. As I mentioned in a previous snippet, the paint job for the bracket failed and I had to do it over again. The second time was the charm, and it is looking good. So I'm going to give that paint 5 days to cure. So today is a Sunday and it's pretty chilly, the last gasp of winter, I guess. And so next Saturday the plan is to put this all back together. So we're getting there, and I'm still debating, should I put some Eastwood chassis black top coat on this section of the frame while it's all, or most of it, is open and exposed. There's not any really significant rust that I can see. The debate goes on. I've got a few days to decide, but we'll see. Anyway, other than that bracket, of course, the bracket for the steering column, which was rusted, and so that's been taken care of. So until the next update, see ya. Almost forgot. Here is, does that go up? This is the steering column mounting bracket, which I have derusted and refinished. This is the part where the paint job failed. And on the last coat, I think what happened is that I waited too long to put the last coat on, and it lifted the previous coats. But be that as it may, I used a stripper to completely remove all of the rust. I'm sorry, not all the rust. All of the failed paint and primer, reprimed and repainted, and this time it came out quite well. So I can feel the paint is soft, and as I said, I'm going to let this thing cure for 5 days before I put it back on the car, and well, closer to 7 days. 6 days, 6 days, if the plan holds and I do this on Saturday of next week. So just wanted to show you that, and until next time, see ya. Okay, let's try to record this. As usual, my lighting sucks, but I'm not a professional YouTuber with all kinds of extra lighting, so I just go with what I've got. Hopefully there'll be enough detail here for you to see it. If not, then maybe I won't post this. What I'm going to do, oops, sorry, I bumped the camera. I'm going to reinstall the, well, not reinstall, install the new steering shaft. So here is the steering wheel end, which I still have secured. I did wire brush that bolt up because it was a little bit caked, and I will put some Loctite glue on that sucker when I'm ready to refasten it. And so we're going to install this and see how easy it is. Now here is my reconditioned intermediate steering shaft bracket, which goes like so on the car. Now you've got two choices here. You can put the bracket on like so before you mount the steering shaft, or you can there's a little bit of a gap, if you can see on the, where are you? If you can see on the bracket, there's a little bit of gap in the bracket, and there's just enough space where you can do that if you already have the bracket on. So 6 of one, half a dozen of another. And so we'll see how well this works. And I'm going to try to put the bracket on and the shaft on at the same time. And If that doesn't work, then we'll try plan B. Also note, you see that little detent or depression in the steering shaft? That's the side that the bolt goes on, so that the bolt sits in that little depression to lock in the shaft. So this thing goes on only basically one way. So let's see what kind of trouble we can get ourselves in. Also, I guess I'll point out, although it should be obvious to anybody who's trying to do this, there is only one way for this bracket to go on, and it goes on like so, and there's a little plastic doodad, I don't know what to call it, that goes in and again locks this bearing in place. So let's see what kind of trouble we can get ourselves into. Gonna come up and around the frame and so then this would go like so. Not sure if that's in all the way. But I need a flashlight. Let's see if I've got one nearby. Yeah, I'll use my little head flashlight. Get a little bit more light here. It's a little better, eh? I'm looking down that bolt shaft to see if that little depression is lined up. It looks like it. Let's see if the bolt goes through. Where are you, Mr. Bolt? Remember, we have to put Loctite on that. Maybe it'll drag it into place as we tighten it. Let's see. What size was that? Was that 10 millimeter? I think it's larger. It is larger. It's probably 13. Let's get a 13 socket. Where did you go? Number 13 socket. tight enough. It's not 13. It's 1.5. But even though this isn't final, what I want to do is just make sure that this shaft is in the right place. And it seems that way. So let's take this out and give it a little Loctite blue. Okay, where's my Loctite blue? This a little bit of a mix. I still haven't determined what the proper torque spec is for this nut, bolt rather. But we'll cross that torquey bridge when we come to it. Oops. A little too much Loctite blue, I think. I still have the steering wheel secured so that it can't turn, and that's important to keep the clock spring from breaking. Let me get a little bit more leverage here. Still with me here? think we'll leave it at that for now. And now we need to do the other side. Okay, let me set up the camera. I'll be right back. All right, are you with me? There's the steering box side. This hose is a little bit in the way from a viewing perspective. Sorry about that. But that's what we're after next. But before I put the other end of the shaft on, I am going to do a little anti-sneeze snot. There's a little flat spot on the steering box side that coincides with the shaft, so it can only go on one way. And so it should not put up a huge fight as long as we have the orientation correct. You guys are kind of in the way. Sorry, you're in the way. I'm going to have to move so I can get in there. So I think there needs to be slight adjustment to get those flat sides to line up from one to the other. I can't do that because the camera's in the way. So, in other words, the splined part here has a flat spot, and while it's close to alignment, I don't think that it's quite there. I need to get a little small adjustable wrench in there and move it a little bit back and forth to make sure that it's aligned properly, because there is a little bit of slop in the steering box, so we need to account for that. Alright, so I'll be back after I've got this little hurdle over and done with. Okay, so I had to bang on the steering shaft. Come on, focus, goddammit. I had to bang on the steering shaft, and what I was looking for was to get the steering shaft in a position so that I could access the bolt hole from the grill, which is basically the correct way to get at that bolt. And it looks like it is orientated correctly. So I think that the shaft is on. And here's what it looks like. I did have to beat on it to get it to go all the way in, but it's on both sides. So the next step, I'm going to put the bolt in last. I'm going to put this bracket on next, so stand by.